Hopefully we can get through this fairly quick, and do appreciate the work that goes into this, Jennifer, Jim. I know, well, all of you really, I do know how much work goes into this. I've been on your side of the table before, and not yours, but theirs. And I know it's a lot, and you guys do a really good job of looking out for us and being frugal and still providing the level of service that our residents expect. So thank you for everything you do. Okay, so Carlos, I guess I'd turn it over to you.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Today, if I can get the presentation up. Right. Today we're going to be holding our general fund overview. Just to reemphasize, the council is aware of this, but just for the community who might be watching. So our budget process, when we look at this, department directors will send us their annual requests. We take a look at the requests, we look at the council priorities, we look at current actuals, year-end projections, past multi-year trends, as well as the external factors that might be affecting our budget, such as, for example, what the market is doing, interest rates, and things like that. And we take all of that information, and I want to recognize the team. I know, Mayor, you just mentioned it, but I want to recognize specifically our Finance Director, Jim Ingram, our Assistant Finance Director, Jennifer Newman, Jamie Deavy, also our Financial Operations Manager, which I don't believe she's here yet, but she was working very, very much in this process as well. And the Assistant City Manager, Tony Nazario, and myself have all been working on this now for several weeks. So get to what we're presenting today to you is a preliminary but pretty comprehensive overview of the general fund. It's a draft budget, and the information that we're going to be presenting to you is based upon the data that we have right now. So we have an estimated value from the property appraiser in terms of new taxable value growth. That affects most of the general fund. We also have information on how the other revenue streams are doing, which we'll share as we go through the presentation. By the time we have the second workshop, we'll have the final number from the property appraiser. We'll know other things a little bit more refined, in a refined sense as well. So that second workshop, which is scheduled for July 8th, which is a second sort of omnibus workshop, which will have the second version of the general fund as well as the second version of the capital and unassigned fund balance and all those things. That'll be July 8th. And by that point, we're pretty much certain that that'll be the budget for the year. Speaking of just going back to today, the general fund overview, next Friday, June 20th, so 1 week from tomorrow, we're going to be doing the capital budget, enterprise funds, special revenue funds, and use of unassigned fund balance. And then by Tuesday, July 15th, if we need it, if the council feels we still have some unanswered questions, we can have another workshop. That's really an option at this point. We don't believe we'll need it, but should you feel that we do, we will. And then on Thursday, July 17th, we expect to have the special city council meeting to set the millage rate. Any questions on the schedule?
Council, any questions? I don't think so.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about FY25, and when I've titled this slide highlights, I don't know if it's a highlight or not, some of these things, but they happened, and they definitely influenced the evolution of what we did this current fiscal year. The most prominent factor was Hurricane Milton. As the council is aware, we had over 12 water main breaks. We cleared hundreds, if not thousands, of trees from roadways. We have been repairing post-storm damage to our roads, our underground infrastructure. You know that still continues in some instances, like on Glen Ridge, up on Fowler, et cetera. And we have processed, thanks to the great work of our grants administrator, we have processed approximately $4 million in FEMA reimbursable costs already to date, and there's going to be more to come, as you know, from Fowler. One of the things that we're really proud of in this budget is we've really enhanced our employee training. That's been a priority that we've talked about here in the chambers several times in the past. So, for example, we are doing Lean Six Sigma training here in the next couple of weeks. That is about ways to improve flow and process. It's from the manufacturing sector, but it applies very well for government processes as well. We have done training on presentations, on safety, financial literacy, wellness, purchasing, and leadership as well. And I want to really recognize Tony Nazario and the work that his team has done to put all of this together. We've also been very focused on compliance. We have taken positions, and we haven't necessarily added positions, but we've taken existing positions when they've come open and we've tweaked them to really address the issues of making sure we have tight controls in our processes and our project management. So for example, we now have positions, we have an environmental compliance specialist, we have a public works project manager, we have an inventory control clerk, which is critical over in Public Works and in Fleet to make sure that, we have understanding of what's going on in terms of, the supply chain. We also converted an engineering tech position and hired an engineer. So we have another, PE certified engineer to back up Mr. McCarthy. In finance, we hired an accountant three, I should say, which is helping, again, with all our compliance efforts. So we feel strongly that we're on the right path here, and we have a lot of controls in place. And we're going to continue that as we go through the next several budgets. We also have focused on enhancing our efficiencies where possible. We consolidated during this year in the budget for this year, we already had planned to consolidate facilities maintenance under Public Works. And what I mean by that is that it used to be that every department was doing their own extermination or their own fire extinguisher or whatever it was. We moved that all together into this budget. And that's been largely successful. There's still some areas, sort of remaining areas we're still trying to clean up, which we'll hope to have accomplished by the end of the year. We also merged Public Works and Utilities, and that is sort of an ongoing process right now in an evolution. And one of the things we're going to be talking about in the budget for 26, sort of a highlight, is we are consolidating the Parks grounds maintenance under Public Works grounds. We're actually planning to do that over the next couple of months in the current fiscal year, and that is to meet a council priority, which I'll talk about shortly. In addition, we implemented vendor control software and BTR software this past year. The vendor control one I really wanted to talk about because that has been a game changer for us. It basically, through the software, it's a third party that vets all our vendors to make sure that their insurance, registration, everything we need from them is current. We have been able to cull a lot of vendors that were sort of on our lists from years past that no longer have that information or they're not even doing business anymore, so that's helped clean that process up. It also provides us the security knowing that all these checks have been done because otherwise we'd have to have staff to do that, and that's a pretty onerous requirement. So that has worked extremely well. And finally, I want to just mention again, we've had a clean audit from this past year, and this budget, the 25 budget, won a GFOA budget award, so we're very proud of that as well.
Mr. B, before you move on from this slide, as long as it's okay with my colleagues on the council, I think it would be a great idea for you to running through that slide took you about 6 minutes or less. It seems to me like this would be a great idea for you to do this during a council meeting when, whether it's during your report or at another part in the agenda. Just, I think this is terrific stuff, and I don't think the public understands a lot of what goes on internally. I mean, we talk about public-facing stuff in our council meetings, but this is really terrific progress that you and your staff have made, and I think it would be great for everybody to know this. I mean, you guys.
Yes, more people are likely to watch the council meeting than the budget workshop also.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's nobody here, so.
You'd rather have two reports. Yeah.
Will do. We can do that.
Okay. And IT, we're getting a message on our screen up here. Oh, you're seeing it too. Please restart your computer.
That would be bad right now.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Okay, so now talking about fiscal 26, the budget that we're here to introduce. So we have certain themes in this budget. I want to just highlight those. First of all, the budget meets the council priorities. There is also no increase in millage proposed from this general fund budget. We are not proposing any new FTEs in the general fund. Budget continues the emphasis on professional development, which I alluded to in the last slide. It continues our emphasis on enhancing services through efficiencies, continues funding of the union contractual obligations, and maintains our competitiveness as an employer of choice. Now, of course, we can't just talk about the positives. We have to also mention that there are certain challenges to the general fund. These will be familiar to the council members. First of all, the ad valorem tax base, as you'll see shortly, is slowing. The growth in the tax base is slowing, which we've been talking about for several years. I mean, that Amazon year was unsustainable. We knew that. The growth has slowed, Last year it came in at 5.3%, if I'm not mistaken. This year it's coming in at 3.4%. So that's something we have to keep an eye on. A number of our remaining revenues are flat and declining. We'll talk about that as well. But the one that I really want to draw your attention to, and I think is the most short-term in terms of a threat, is the House Committee, Select Committee on Property Taxes that has been impaneled and is working over the summer. This panel, or this committee, has several concepts that they've been looking at already initially, and these may change, but these are the initial proposals as was shared by the Florida League with us. So you see on the screen here, several of these, if not all of these, would pose a significant existential threat to how we operate today. Particularly the one about the proposed new $500,000 homestead exemption. If that were to take place, just to give you an idea of scale, so in Temple Terrace, the average home right now is valued at about $335,000. Now, of course, not every home has a homestead exemption on it, but a lot of them do in our community. We're fortunate. We have a lot of owner-occupied housing. If that $500,000 homestead exemption, it would basically mean that if you had a house, an average house in the city, you wouldn't pay property taxes if you had a homestead exemption on it. So it would be a dramatic impact. Of course, I know in conversations I've had with some of you, there's a notion of like, well, they have to do something else. They can't just let us go bankrupt. I don't know. I don't know what the plans are. Because at the same time, the House Speaker has been advocating not for property tax reform, but for sales tax reform. He wants to reduce the sale tax by 3/4 of a point. They can't both happen because we just wouldn't be able, nobody would be able to provide services. So that's something we're taking a close look at as we go through the next several months. And to just understand a little bit more of the magnitude of that in our community, how homestead works. So this slide was actually provided to us by the Florida League, and it shows the difference between just value and taxable value. So just value is what properties would be assessed at if there were no homestead or no exemptions. The taxable value is the value that's based on the exemptions. So you see the difference. In 2007, the gap between the taxable value and the just value for the city of Temple Terrace was a little over $671 million. In 2024, that gap had now grown to over $1 billion. Actually, $1.3 billion was the difference. If you look at those, now again, recall the $500,000 proposed exemption, that gap will just, it'll blow up. It'll be much, much, much more extreme. So putting that aside, let's talk about where we currently are with ad valorem. So as I mentioned, our increase for this year is projected to be 3.43. That's based on the preliminary numbers from the property appraiser. Again, the final number could change that. Historically, the final number is usually a little higher, but last year was an aberration. It went down. So again, we don't know what it'll be this year. But 3.43% growth will generate about $19,572,378 in tax revenue to the city. Also, to have the council and the public understand sort of where those dollars go. If you look at public safety, which is one of the core services that any community provides, our public safety budget, not taking into account capital, but just looking at personnel costs and retirement pensions, things like that. For public safety alone, in '26, we're budgeting $23,216,334. So that's 119% of the ad valorem revenue we just talked about in the last slide. So I mentioned that because, again, if ad valorem goes away or is changed, public safety will have a direct impact. I mean, we'll have to address that issue because they are the largest consumer of the ad valorem tax base. Of course, we still fund other departments, not just public safety. So how do we do that? Well, there are other general fund revenues. They're demonstrated on this slide. So you see, for example, in the pale blue, you'll have other taxes. Other taxes includes BTR, taxes on natural gas, electricity, water, communication service taxes. We do have an increase program based on our year-end estimate for those. So you'll see a slight increase there. Franchise fees are in bold green on the slide. And you see that the franchise fees have sort of they've been flat lately. So we're not expecting a tremendous amount of new revenue from franchise fees. Intergovernmental revenue, which is the lavender, includes things like cigarette taxes, the half-cent sales tax, which have been largely flat. It also includes FEMA-obligated reimbursements, which we put in at $350,000 over the next year. Interest earnings is the orange, and the interest earnings are reduced based on the year-end estimate. Currently, the Fed fund rate is at 4.33%. This is always the crystal ball piece we do every year, looking at what some of the analysts are saying. Some people say maybe it'll stay flat that way. Others are saying we might see a drop to maybe 3.75% in the Fed rate. So we're basically forecasting that our interest revenue is probably going to come down. Licenses and permits is the brown column, and you'll see it kind of drops off the map, off the chart, I should say, in 24, because we moved the bulk of the permits to the building fund. And we're not talking about the building fund today. That's a separate fund. We'll talk about that next week. And then miscellaneous is the yellow, and this includes everything from 401 forfeitures, claim settlements, where we fund overhead payments, the rental for cell towers, et cetera. Everything is globbed into that sort of miscellaneous column. Now I want to talk about the highlights for FY26. So this budget, it funds several council priorities, including the licensing costs in the general fund for the document management system that Councilmember Kravitz had raised during council priority setting. We have $25,000 put in this budget for the licensing and operating costs. We have $50,000 in the capital budget, which we'll talk about next week for the actual implementation. This budget also increases funding for council's professional development, again, another priority. Your travel and training budget was set at somewhere around $11 million, boy, that would be great, wouldn't it? $11,000, and we've increased it to $20,000 in this current budget. This budget also funds the reinstatement of the Police Explorer program and also looks to fund the CALIA accreditation for the police department. This is an initiative spearheaded by Chief Staley. CALIA is the national accreditation. As you all know, we are accredited at the state level for the police department. At the fire department, we're accredited nationally. So the police department is looking to explore that. Whether they do it or not is still to be seen, but right now we're budgeting for it. The Police Explorer program was actually council priority for some members of council from last year. That's continued. We weren't able to get it off the ground last year, but now we can with Chief Staley's leadership. We are also anticipating to, as I mentioned, consolidate parks grounds with public works grounds. The reason we're doing that is two main reasons. Number one, efficiencies. As you remember last year, we were ordering mowers for one department and mowers for the other, and they were slightly different mowers. We were also, trailers and everything. There's a lot of redundancy there. So that's number one. The second one is more pressing, which is, as the council and the communities talked about recently, park maintenance. Right now, the ground staff and leisure services is a small team, and they're trying to do all the parks maintenance across every single park and keep up with that. And as we've all recognized, perhaps not to the expectation that we have for what we want to see in those parks. It doesn't mean they're not working hard. It's just there's a lot there. So what we are proposing is by merging that, we'll have a lot more employees now that can address the issues. So we'll have a bigger team. We can be strategic about how they get delegated out to do some of that maintenance. So we feel that this will be a better approach for us. Again, a lot more capacity without adding staff. So that's what we're not proposing to add anybody to do that. Another council priority was, and I think this was Councilmember Fernandez's, about the historical artifacts and trying to preserve and have those displayed. So we are looking to rent a storage facility next year to basically store our historical artifacts. Right now, we don't have the historical artifacts. As I mentioned in the last council meeting, some of us on the team here, we have a field trip planned to visit 2 properties where people who are local historical sort of advocates have stored a lot of stuff. We don't know what that stuff is. We're going to take a look at that. This budget contemplates about $2,800 to rent a storage facility, a conditioned storage facility, for a year. Allow us to keep those things and cared for and under the right climactic conditions. And then, as we mentioned here, if we do renovations to City Hall with some of the other buildings we're building, we might have spaces to display here. In the meantime, We have cases available at the library, for example. We have cases we can move to the Family Rec Center as well if we have artifacts that we can start putting out once we get this field trip and understand what's available. Okay? Also wanted to note that if you look at our expenditures, operational expenditures, not personnel expenditures, and you look at all the departments that aren't public safety, the operational expenditures actually go down budget to budget. So we're very proud of that. I want to give kudos to the department directors. Everybody really sharpened their pencils this year to see about what we needed to spend and what we could forsake. So that was very good to help us start on a good footing in this draft. Another thing I would like to mention here, I just put it in passing. This is going to come to your attention. I've mentioned this in an update before to the council, is school resource officer at Greco Middle School. We will have a contract for your consideration at some point over the next couple of months, I believe. And there's a revenue stream that's going to come from that we have not accounted for in this budget. So those will be new dollars. We are not proposing to add any police staff to accomplish that in the current year, in this first sort of trial year, if you will. So those will be new dollars, again, that'll influence in a positive way the budget. I'm talking about wages. This is a very important slide because we're always very concerned to make sure that we remain as competitive as possible in the marketplace. So what you see here is we have tried to articulate the different wage categories across our sectors of our employee pool. So you've got in the police union in fiscal 26, in the next year of their contract, they have a COLA of about 4.5%. The police and fire contracts also have a step that's built in, and the step it's almost a guaranteed step, basically. It's 1 year to the next. And so when you look at the step for the police union, it's about 4%. The fire union COLA is about 4%. The fire union step, I say it's an average here, 3.7, because the way they calculate their steps is slightly different. There's a graduated approach, so it makes it a little harder. So we just gave you an average. So we wanted to make sure that our general employees, as you know, it's important to make sure that we value everybody in the organization. There's a lot of, again, I've mentioned it to every single one of you. The person in waist deep in sanitary sewage trying to fix something is very important to us particularly at that moment. And so, and everybody, all the other work that every other general employee does is critical to the organization. So we are proposing a 4% COLA effective October 1, which is in line with what we've done the last couple of years. And we are proposing to keep the general employee merit increase at 2%. Now, the merit is not like a step. It's not an automatic thing. The merit, people have to actually, provide us good service to get the merit. Not everybody gets it. I would imagine that most employees do. So that's one of the critical components of this year's budget. Now looking at some assumptions that we've got in terms of costs. So looking at health insurance, we are projecting a 12% increase in health insurance. We do not have the final increase number yet from the broker. That typically comes later in the fiscal year. We feel that 12% right now is a pretty good number. It could go up, it could go down. But again, that's the reason why we do this. This is a draft right now, and when we come back in July, we'll hopefully have that number now. And then liability and property insurance, we're projecting a 10% increase. And then workers' comp, we are expecting it to stay flat. This budget also continues the council's investment in economic development, in the economic development organizations. For the last several years, the council has budgeted $10,000 for the Tampa Bay EDC. We are in the President's Council of the Tampa Bay EDC. We are also projecting or budgeting $6,500 for the Temple Terrace Uptown Chamber. This covers the sponsorships for events throughout the year, and this is very much in line with what we've done over the last several years. We are also repeating what we've done in the current fiscal year budget by funding the Chamber Innovation and Leadership Program. This program is about to kick off at the end of this fiscal year now. And this $4,000, $3,000 of this number is actually for us to pay for a student, one of our city employees, to attend the program. And then the remaining $1,000 is a sponsorship because we host 2 of the days and we're sponsoring 1 of the 2 days. The final substantive item we'd like to talk about are credit card fees. as the community, as the council, I'm sure knows, and a lot of folks in the community know, credit card payments are becoming more and more popular. In fact, they're becoming so popular. You see a lot of advertising from different credit card companies trying to, get the different segments of the market to use their credit card. And the way they do that a lot of the times is by advertising what you can do with your points from the credit card purchases, right? So you can travel, you can have discounts in different merchants, things like that. Well, those points are passed on. That cost for those points are passed on, and they are passed on, in our case, to us. We have absorbed that cost over the last several years, and a lot of organizations have. But now, over the last, I'd say probably 2 to 3 years, what you're seeing, I'm not going to say it's universal, but it's definitely more commonplace than it has been, is a lot of merchants will now say, if you want to use a credit card, you're going to pay more. All right. So, for example, gas stations do it all the time. You pay cash, it's probably 10 cents cheaper to the gallon for gas. If you go to certain businesses, restaurants, now you start to see a charge on your bill that's a little extra, again, to cover the processing costs. In terms of government, the tax collector is probably the most prominent one. If you go to renew your registration or get a deed to your title, to your car, clearly states when you go to pay for it that if you pay by credit card, you're going to pay a percentage higher than you would if you paid by another means. So what we're proposing here in the budget is to pass the costs on in the same way the tax collector is doing that. I will tell you, in the general fund, it's not a tremendous impact, but in the utilities, it is a major, major impact. So we're probably spending, we'll get the final numbers for next week's presentation, but somewhere between $125,000 to $140,000 a year to pay just these fees to cover the credit card purchases, the convenience of it. So what we are proposing is, if you consider this, would be to pass that cost on to the consumer, to the customer. It would be, we're looking at about probably a max of 2.75% on transactions. We would still allow customers to obviously pay in cash. If they wanted to use e-check, we wouldn't pass on a charge for the e-check. There would be no charge to the customer for that, which is again, in line with a lot of other entities. And we would not do this effective October 1 because that wouldn't allow the community any time to gear up for that. We've budgeted, if the council approves this, that would go into effect January 1 of 26. So it would allow us a couple of months to get the word out to folks that this is about to happen. So next steps, as I mentioned at the outset, the property appraiser is going to be submitting their final taxable value to us by July 1. The finance and executive department teams, we're going to be refining numbers based on new data and input we get from the council. For example, today we'll be working on that to put all that together, and before the next meeting, the second round of this meeting in July, and then obviously next week we have the capital and the other budgets we talked about. Happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Fernandez.
All right, I have a couple questions. One is regarding the document management system, which I wholeheartedly agree we need to create a better process for that. But we're talking about changing our finance system and functional area management. Is there something, I want to make sure that whatever we do with document management is complements or at least works together with the other software that we're talking about, because that's going to be a big, that's going to encompass so much of the city activity. So.
Yep. No, what we're doing right now, actually, the finance team, in addition to working on the budget, they're going through all the ERP. We have 3 ERP finalists, and they've been doing these massive marathon demos with the ERP finalists. And I know they're asking questions about compatibility with different pieces of software. So we'll add that. I don't know if there's going to be a tremendous amount of overlap between the ERP, what the ERP does, and the document management software. But we'll ask the question to see if there's overlap and if there would be conflicts that would be created by whatever system. Right now, the number that I provided, the $50,000 capital and $25,000 for operating, that is an estimate based upon some research we've done online, looking at different document management pricing schemes. So we don't have a specific system yet that's been targeted. So we'll still have some time to vet that process.
Okay. And then, so with the state making changes or implementing not just a potential revenue source or loss, but they've also made changes to like the Kelly days at the state level. So this is kind of two two questions. One is, so we have a contract in place with our fire department and our police department. What happens to those contracts if the state makes a change that's not covered or it's different from what our contract has? Our contract still has 2 years to go, but that the state law may go into effect now.
So we're still reviewing. I have not yet gone through fully the bill that the bill you're referring to, so I do need to do that. And this is probably a question for Mr. Mueller, because we do have a contract. If there are, and we have to really see if that bill does in fact change what would be anticipated, because that'll have a dramatic, I mean, if that was changing mid-contract, that would be a dramatic change to how we budget for that. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about today would have to change. Do you have any insight right now?
I've been through that bill. I'm familiar with that bill. So the bill bears watching. It's not going to have any impact on us now. The crux of the bill is that it directs the state fire marshal to do certain things, to come up with statewide policies and framework for certain things. But the fire marshal has to do that work and hasn't done that work yet. One of the provisions, one of the things that would have the most impact on us and presumably everybody else is there's a recommendation in there. It's not a shall word in the bill. It's a recommendation to the state fire marshal that they look at scheduling that would require no more than 42 hours a week.
Right.
Well, there's no way to do that on our current, and our or fire department is not an anomaly. This is how most fire departments are set up, 24 hours on, and well, you can't do more than one 24-hour shift in a 7-day period without going over 42 hours. That's the biggest question mark in the bill, but the bill doesn't direct the fire marshal to implement that policy. The bill recommends that the fire department consider that option. So that bill, as it stands now, doesn't have any impact on us. However, it could, depending on how the fire marshal carries out the mandates of the bill.
So really my main question though is not knowing exactly how that may impact. We have a contract in place.
Yeah, I don't know that.
I don't know, how would we remedy that? Does the state law supersede our contract if they make a change? And how do we prepare?
Well, it's something we'd have to look into as this thing moves forward as to what impact it would have. As the mayor said, from what I saw of that bill, it's going to be directing or recommending to the fire marshal to implement some policies or whatever, which may impact the union, which we may have to.
And that's what I'm
talk with the
asking
union
is if we have a contract in place and the state does take a position that something has to be put into place before our contract is up, does that mean that, and it could be maybe the middle of our fiscal year, would we have to adopt that recommendation prior to our contract being before it expires, or would it just be part of the next negotiation and thus planning would happen in the normal budget process?
I don't have a definite answer for you on
Okay.
that yet. I would have to look into that. It's the legal department.
Okay.
And talk with the fire chief.
So that's just a question that I have. And then regarding the potential for the state to remove property taxes as a revenue source. I don't necessarily I see both sides of this, and that where people don't want to be taxed on their homes, it's like essentially renting your house. But at the same time, it costs money to provide services. So what can we do as a city to express, I guess to lobby the state lawmakers in that if they want to remove that revenue source, what is the option that they're suggesting, that how do we continue to fund the services that we offer as a city?
So, if I may jump in on that one too. So the composition of the House committee, we have the list of legislators who are from our region who are on that House committee. One of them is Mike Owen from East Hillsborough. And so at the point we are in right now, it's our opinion, I say ours, the city manager's mind, that our lobbyist kind of agrees, and this is what we're getting from members of the House. This is what they're asking of local governments right now. They're asking from FLC, from SLC. This is what they're telling us as local governments. Look, don't come in here screaming with your hair on fire and telling us, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, because we're not going to hear you. I mean, what we need to know is model these different scenarios to the best of your ability and give us information about how each of these scenarios would impact your city, because it's different. The pie chart about the revenue streams, that's different for there are cities that get 100% of their revenue comes from ad valorem taxes. We've got a pretty diverse revenue stream, so we're not.
But still,
But, right, so
ad valorem.
what we're doing, and some of the work we saw in this slide, and some of it we don't have ready yet, is to model the different scenarios the best we can. Like the city manager was talking about, the average home in Temple Terrace is 300 and whatever.
335.
Yeah, 335. So we want to say, okay, if you did the $500,000 homestead exemption, the real impact, this is not hypothetical, the real impact as city of Temple Terrace would be X. Okay, well, under X, we would have a revenue deficit of whatever that number is, and this would be the impact. We would have to make up that much. Now, how would we do that? I don't know. I mean, we would have to start talking about all kinds of stuff that's pretty unappealing to most of us. That's the state we're in now. We're trying to get appointments with a number of delegates from around here, the people that are members of that committee. I will not be going and advocating for any particular position without that I don't do that without the council's approval. But in this particular case, I'll just be presenting, this is
Right.
this is the modeling of, if you did this, this would be the impact. So it's not an editorial, it's facts.
Right.
Now, I would still want you to know that I'm doing this. We haven't gotten the appointments yet, so I haven't said anything. But that's kind of where we're going with that. And that's what the House has asked local governments to do.
So when we have those calculations, is that something that you can bring up so that the full public can hear it at a council meeting? That way.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I don't have at this moment a position on one way or the other. It's more that I think that the city of Temple Terrace is very responsible with the tax dollars that we collect in maximizing what we've brought in and providing service to the community. And I mean, we're constantly conscious of reducing waste and being the most efficient, and there's just a cost to providing the services. So there has to be a mechanism to collect the funds to pay for the services that I think the people in this community have expressed a desire to have. So that's all. My concern is, I don't think we have a problem this year going into this budget. I just am concerned as this year goes on that we express that, and that the public does know that that's on the table. And then I just have one more question, and that is, so with the combining the moving the parks management into the full groundskeeping management. Let's just say that right now, if the Parks and Rec director believes that something needs to be tended to more, or maybe there's a schedule at the ball fields or something going on, the Parks and Rec director can obviously directs that staff. What happens if now they're managed by somebody else who's not directly answerable to the Parks and Rec director? I mean, is the Parks and Rec director basically just going to have the ability to just say, I need more coverage on these fields or these parks?
Yep. So I'd kind of compare this to what we did last year going into the current fiscal year, where we took all the facilities maintenance items and we combined them, because you can make similar arguments about that. It's like, hey, I like to control what happens in my facility and how we do this and that. And we had those conversations when we met with some of the department directors during last year's budget. It's like, well, we've always done it this way, and now you're going to take that away. And I think what we found in most instances that process has worked well, because I think Jason and Ron Skolnick, the deputy director, head of facilities, they've been very responsive to all the department directors. So I think we have a different way, we have different people than we had years ago, and I think that obviously that's part of it. We have a different culture that is growing in those departments in terms of public works, and how we in terms of public works address the full organization, basically our internal customers. So I think that has given us sort of the inspiration to look at this model as well, and we think it can work. We are ironing out the details, so I don't have a full plan for you today. Like I said, we've not implemented this. We're looking to transition over the next couple of months. But in talking with Mr. Langfeld, who's here in the audience, he's had the same concerns. He's expressed the same concerns. Hey, if I need something, I can just call my guys. I think a lot of that will still be there, because, again, it's really about we want the service to be better. We don't want the service to decline. Otherwise, if the service is going to decline, we wouldn't even entertain doing this. But it has to be improved. And it has to be improved also broadly for the community, so that, so the issues of, trash not being picked up or the parks not being mowed, things like that. Again, not because people aren't trying. It's just there's just not enough of them probably to make it happen. So we feel like this will work for that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Chambers.
Thank you, sir. To continue on that topic, so I am a fan of consolidation. Back in my past employment, it was all under Parks and Rec. So it's now all shifted. It's split after so many years, and then now it's all under Public Works. But I agree on the consolidation. The question I have is, our goal is to increase park maintenance. An example, cleaning of bathrooms, picking up trash. So will this example, if the park bathrooms are done, and I don't know exact date, twice a week, will we go to 3 days a week? How will this improve the maintenance? I understand about having more people to turn, but are you going to spend more money on maintenance? And is that included in next year's budget, more for some cleaning supplies, things like that?
So right now the budget is oriented as if the departments are still separate. So the requests that were made by Mr. Langfeld, the requests that were made by Mr. Warrenfeld for their own shops, that's what's in the projected FY26 budget. We didn't make dramatic changes there. We might make changes in the capital side in terms of, equipment redundancies, but the general fund, we didn't, because this process is still we're still working out the details right now. In the 27 budget, those things will probably be articulated out separately. If you want, what I can do is at some point over the next several weeks, once we have a transition plan really fleshed out, I can have a presentation made to the entire city council to help address some of those questions and understanding of what we anticipate in terms of cleaning expectations, mowing expectations, at least generally. That way you can have a comfort level.
I think since it is one of our goals, and when a citizen asks me, for next year's budget, what's going to be better in the parks, it would be nice to know what's better in the parks. Mm-hmm. Increased frequency of cleanings, picking up trash. Do we pick up trash on Saturday afternoons like we don't do now? How's that going to happen? Things like that.
Yep. Yeah, we'll make a presentation during a regular meeting.
Okay. That's all I have.
Yes, thank you. I got some questions. You indicated early on in the discussion that there was going to be no new FTEs requested for this year.
For general fund.
Yeah, pardon me?
For general fund.
For general, I understand. But how about for any carryover FTEs from last budget that never were implemented since we go budget to budget? Is there any carryover vacancies?
Yeah, come on.
Or open positions that still need to be filled. I don't mean necessarily the creation of new positions, but open
There were
slots.
yes. There are still some open positions that aren't as easy to fill. I would say a few of them are within dispatch. It's not because there isn't I think a good flow. It's just we have a high standard that we want to provide to the community. So just that vetting process is very rigorous. In other departments and other areas, like any new position that was created for fiscal year 25 has been filled. One of those positions was the accountant 3 position. We have someone that we successfully recruited from Pasco County to come work with us. Some of the positions that we have open now are positions that tend to open up due to normal attrition. Maybe it's an employee who is a blue-collar worker who spends a lot of time outside, and some of these positions just historically open up throughout the year. I don't think we have an issue with just across the board recruiting and filling our positions, regardless if they're positions with very technical skill sets or if it's just positions we can train someone. I think we have really good momentum. And it just really comes down to ebbs and flows of that operation will determine what's open at the time.
The only reason I bring it up is that, we look at our actual spending this year, okay, irrespective of what the budget was, but our actual spending is X, and we're going to take it to Y, and I like to do a bridge. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be in the budget? And I just, I would hope that, somewhere in the discussion, we figure out how many of those employees that are not in the actual, but will be if filling, assuming everything gets filled, would be in the budget. Helps us understand. So, and no new FTEs doesn't quite answer the whole question. So it's just something for comparisons as we go forward. Okay, thanks, Tony. The other thing is the data management, so the document management system. Whose department will that come under? Basically, and it may be too early to answer that question, but.
I think it'll be a collaboration between IT and the legislative department.
Okay, so it'll be focused there. All right, okay, cool. The school resource officer, what's that? Any idea what that revenue source might be? And I'm not asking, 50,000, 100,000, 20,000.
Right, and don't hold me to this number because this may change.
No, not hold on, just relativity.
We were told potentially 135,000.
Okay, more than that. I was expecting about 65 or 70.
Yeah, I think they have more than one officer.
Okay, well that's
goes
why.
through there, and so they're looking at what their costs have been, and so that's a number. Again, that number could change though.
So what's happened? What's happening with that this year? Is we supplying the?
We're not doing
manpower?
anything. We're not doing anything
We're not
until
doing
we bring it
anything.
to you for your review.
Okay, all right. Question, and I lost track of this during the session. What happened to sovereign immunity? Did that fail again, I hope?
I believe that
I
failed.
did.
Okay, I lost track of it, because that would influence your insurance number. And then sales tax, you can't have your cake and eat it too. There's only so much you can do with it. But just doing the long division, well, two things. Just doing the long division, if you eliminate all property taxes, our sales tax is going to go over 13%. Instead of 6.5, 6 or 7 or whatever. And number two is nothing can happen until after 2028 because it'd be a referendum item. Still has to go through the voters before anything would happen with that. That's all I have at this point. Thank you.
Councilmember Kravitz?
Just a curious thought. Good job finding the fat in the budget. I'm just curious where it came from. You said that a number of line items were reduced.
So what we ask everybody to look at is based on your actual costs to date. So when we look at the budget, there's actual costs, there's historical costs. So we will go through those numbers and say, okay, listen, if you had budgeted, let's say, $1,000 for an item, but you've only spent 50 thus far this year, and if you look historically, you spent maybe 200. Well, we don't need to keep budgeting $1,000. We can go down to $200, and that's so things like that. If you multiply that, you permeate it through all the different departments. Those kinds of exercises. That's a lot of the times where some of that cost savings will come from. There might be things that are unique to specific departments right now, but generally speaking, that's the process we go through.
Great, awesome. And the 120 to 140K that's going to be derived from credit card fees, is that going to go into the utilities fund?
So we're not going to get revenue, we're going to save. So it's a cost savings. And so we anticipate that cost savings will be largely, of that number, the 125 to 140, the vast majority of it is into utilities. It's only a small portion that's in general fund, because the general fund portion for credit cards tends to be mostly in leisure services, camp registrations, things like that at the rec center.
Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, I share Councilmember Chambers' concern about the combination of these two maintenance groups. Not to put too fine a point on it, but if it would only really lead to more maintenance if one of the groups was not already fully utilized. So I wonder.
Well, our goal is to make sure that everybody is utilized to the maximum potential that we can.
Yeah. Well, I hope it works.
Yeah. So we'll bring the plan back to you so you have a chance to review it and you'll understand it.
Okay. Good job, staff. Thank you very much for this. I don't think, I've been up here for a long time. I don't think you found fat in the budget as much as people, you've historically spent less than, every director has always spent less than what we've given them. I think you just came in and did it on the front end instead of the back end. So, but thank you for that. It's a tight year as the property valuations continue to level off, which is good and bad. That has a good side to it also. So, but that's just an economic trend, and so we knew it was coming, and so that's very helpful to keep us from having to raise the millage rate. We have lowered the millage rate twice in recent years, and so I also want to thank you for couple of things. One is the organizational improvement that you've been working on since you got here for about 3 years now. And so I think we're seeing dividends from that. And I think investing in our human resources, our employees, has been a wise thing. And I'm glad to see that we're continuing to do that. I wish we could pay increases even higher than we are. But I can tell you I am firmly committed to this being a good, sound management practice, because every time we develop our people and we bring the rock stars in that we have here, it saves us money. And I'm looking out here, and just the people here, not all the directors are here, but I can tell you money that we have saved since we hired Ron as a facilities manager. I can tell you money that we've saved since Jason came on board in Public Works. I can tell you money we've saved because of Tony and his team in HR, things that have changed. Money that we have saved and recognized that we already had because of the finance team here, putting things right where they ought to be. Efficiencies that we've discovered, fire, police, community development, IT. I can look at every single one of these people here and tell you that they've saved us money or recognized or solved problems, and that's not even, we don't even have them all here. And so legal, same thing with legal. They've brought in money from past, cleaned up our old books and stuff like that. So I know I'm getting long-winded, but I think continuing to invest in our people and developing our people and giving opportunities for them to learn and to flourish, and giving them the freedom to not run amok, but the flexibility to fix things in their area is money well spent. And so I hope that we continue with the staff development. The employee engagement piece, I think, is really big. The stuff that Amy Hutchler and Marissa and some of the others, when they put on these chili cook-offs and luncheons and stuff like that, employees really respond to that kind of thing. So I think that's money well invested. And I think we have assembled a terrific team. I think we had great employees before, but I have seen this team just really blossom since I've been here. And so that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you fund it, you let it happen, you promote it, you come up with good procedures. It doesn't just happen. Organizations don't get better just because you wish they would or you hope they will. They get better because of the things that you do. And so thank you and all of you for that. We'll have good years and we'll have tight years. That's just the way, it happens in life. It's not just the city. there's a lot of legislative unknowns right now with the property tax reform and I'm sure that in the next couple of years, something is going to happen. I don't know what that something is going to look like. I don't think anybody really knows right now what it's going to look like, but it's going to look like it. But I don't think it's smart to go, get our hair on fire and over what could happen. We can't control it anyway. I mean, we're going to do what we can do, and the city's going to, we're going to figure it out. So anyway, I think this is a good product, and thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have one question.
Sure.
And a statement.
Sure.
So my question I forgot to ask, and I know this may also include capital, but are we planning to use any reserves? I know the capital part's not with us yet.
Yep.
Just a
If you're
quick yes or
referring to
no.
like reserves, unassigned fund balance, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we will have expenditures from that.
Okay. And for council, this is not about the budget. At the last council meeting, I talked about, this has to do with artifacts and our report on our committee, that we were going to have a display at the Tampa Museum, History Museum. That's not going to happen. And part of the reason is we just haven't identified the artifacts. When I say we, part of our committee, Marissa and some of the other private citizens and employees working on that, there's just not enough to take into a display right now. So that's why they're doing the field trips to try to determine all these different artifacts we hear about. So
They are doing a 1920s display, though, where I think Temple Terrace is going to, I don't know how much we're going to be integrated into that, but Rodney's told me that they're going to,
okay.
Temple Terrace will be in the 1920s. I don't know the details of that. I don't know if it'll be a mention or I don't know what they're going to do, but.
I just didn't want people to see me on TV saying, go down and look for our display, because it's not there.
Yeah.
I want to follow a comment.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
To the mayor's point about we're going to have good years and bad years, and something could come along to disrupt it. Milton could have really done that this year without what you guys have done in prep and execution, and just when the storm clouds left, you guys were out there working, and your staffs and everything. Milton screwed up a lot of towns, a lot of cities haven't recovered, and we recovered very, very quickly. Finance even collected the money quicker. So I mean, that could have been a real disaster. It could have gone sideways very easily. So
It's still not quite done yet, is it?
well, it's all right. It's a lot better in a lot of places.
Councilmember Kravitz.
To follow up on that, completely agree. And I was just curious if there's any, is there any additional provision made for drainage improvements in this budget or hurricane preparedness overall? I was wondering if you could.
Yep, good question. Actually, we're going to talk about that next week, and we have the study in next week's budget, don't we?
Wastewater, yes.
Stormwater.
Stormwater.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we actually are programming, sorry, just to make sure, we've had a lot of numbers in our heads over the last couple of days. So in next week's budget, there will be we are recommending a stormwater master plan. As you know, I mean, with Fowler, I mean, that happened during the hurricane. The hurricane, in my mind, precipitated it, basically, but we've got issues with our stormwater system. We have issues, to be very candid, I mean, we have issues with a lot of our underground infrastructure. I mean, you're seeing that more and more as we have, to the mayor's point, we have new eyes, fresh eyes looking at things, and we're finding things now. We're finding things that may have been products of perhaps historical deferred maintenance, things like that. So we're going to have some long-term costs. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to affect the FY26 budget dramatically, but over time, we're going to have the conversation about how we invest not only in our wastewater and potable water system, but also stormwater system. We were fortunate to get ARPA funds that helped us do some pretty significant stormwater improvements. But if you look at those costs, what that costs for the amount of like linear feet of work, it's expensive. So we have money programmed, we'll talk about it next week, for a stormwater master plan to have that looked at and then come back with recommendations for capital improvements that we'll have to budget incrementally over the next decade, probably.
Yeah, thank you. Sure. That's great.
I just have one.
Councilmember Fernandez.
For the enterprise funds, when when we are going through those budgets, and just to actually get back to what you had just said regarding the water systems, either storm water, sewer, or our water delivery, when we talk about those budgets, can we also talk about some of the long-term planning and what you will have found? Because we have had, multiple water delivery line breaks, storm sewer breaks, storm water breaks, sewer line breaks. I know in the budget, we're talking about obviously what we're going to be spending next year, but I think we need to have, as we're planning the year's budget, we need to have maybe an overall understanding of what these systems need due to their age or changes in technology that have rendered, that we found that old materials weren't good or something like that.
So we have a water treatment facility study underway today, and that was budgeted, and we expect that those results will lead us to a capital program for the water treatment plants. It may also touch on some distribution. I'm not sure of the full scope of that study, but once we get that, we'll have a better idea of at least one component of it. I can tell you we are not going to be prepared during this budget cycle with these two workshops to address. That's a pretty large, study and analysis. I think between the water treatment plant study, the stormwater study, if the council so wishes to approve it, and other work as we're doing, again, with new people. Like I mentioned at one of the initial slides, we have an environmental compliance specialist now. Well, that person is augmenting our water treatment facility dramatically because they're looking at, okay, are tanks the right kind of tanks? Is the water quality, are we doing the sampling the right way? Is there something about the infrastructure that's impacting that? So they're already looking at things and they're identifying things. So it's just going to take us, they just started a few months ago, so this is going to take us a little bit of time to get to the point where I feel comfortable we have a comprehensive plan for every single one of those elements you outlined. I think we're going to have components of it definitely between the first study and the next one we just mentioned. But it's not going to happen in the next month. It's going to be a while.
So I know we'll talk about it at those budget hearings. My concern that I just want to express prior to that is that in the past, years past, the city did not we did not assess the rates for our enterprise funds correctly. And that severely impacted the city's ability, and I know this is going back many years, but it impacted the city's ability to upgrade, provide the maintenance, and now recently, a few councils back, we started creating the right billing rates in order to accomplish and keep these systems working. But so I just want to make sure that as we go into those budget meetings, that we're not establishing a rate that's not going to give us what we need for the maintenance and the repairs or the upgrades, because the longer we wait, even though we're keeping rates low or lower, the longer we wait, we could end up actually costing people a lot more in the future. So that's as part of the process when we're establishing the budget.
Yep, no, that makes sense. And what we do when we give you the rate, the recommended rate, is Jim, Jennifer, and myself will sit down and we'll look at the 5-year capital program for the utilities. And typically what we've done is we're sensitive to the rate as well. We don't want to overburden the public. But you make a very good point because there's a lot of capital improvements that we've already identified, today, much less ones that may come out of the studies that we've talked about here. So there's a lot there. We haven't finalized those numbers yet. Well, next week, we'll have a pretty decent understanding already initially, maybe not the final understanding. Between now and the second workshop, we'll have a better viewpoint of what that rate will be. But yeah, you make a good point. It is something that we are looking for at right now, and I think once we have the results of some of these analyses, we're going to have even more pressures on that rate if you want to keep up with it. I think you make a very good point. There's deferred maintenance, so it's probably been a product of some of the past practices and rate aversion, perhaps. But
Yes.
Probably be a good idea to wait till we're talking about the
Yep.
enterprise funds to have this discussion.
Yes, that my only concern was just making sure it was part of the thought process before they come to us.
Okay. Anything else on the general fund? City manager?
sir.
Finance? We miss anything? Directors? Okay, if nothing else, we will be adjourned. Thank you all very much.